Hey, Tom, how you doing? So, you know what? I've been over here many times and I've seen a lot of your work. And I'd like to ask you a few questions about art in general and art in particular, from your perspective. There are three things that I noticed about your art that I think is a common thing. I noticed that a lot of your work is take at night. Mhm. A lot is outside, and a lot you have color motifs. Your muted, hushed tone. Can you kind of give me some feedback or some insights into those three areas that I recognize in your work?
I think living in the city, that's what my subject matter is, and just kind of being around it all the time, and especially at night, that kind of dark, muted tones that you get from the sky. It's always interested me. It's kind of a mystery to in the surroundings, and I really like that and try to convey that in the paintings and the sort of the romance of not really knowing, what's around the corner and kind of, surprising, little elements of living in a city. And, city life is, it's very different than being out in the country. A lot of it can be very kind of polarizing because there's always something going on and always a little, you know, uh, whether it's, violence or noise or pollution, there's always, something that's happening. Um, but trying to find something that's, that's quiet and a little bit more peaceful, is something that it always interested me. And I think with doing night scenes, it's going to be, much more muted color palette, more violets, more, blues and greens, and just kind of working with what I'm seeing, at night. And I've always been drawn to those kind of nightscapes.
Okay. Tony, I really like the part about the nighttime.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times when I read about stories of set in old houses and nighttime. It's kind of scary and eerie. Mm-hmm. And there's a sense of, in some of your work, a sense of foreboding, a sense of mystery, you said. And I'd like to ask you about when you were a child, how did you feel about nighttime? And does any of your memories from being a child at night play into your work now?
Hmm. About that. Yeah, I think a lot of it's just, that kind of not knowing, and it can be a little unsettling that not knowing what's out there, and especially, as a child, not really knowing what's out in the big, the big world out there. But in some ways, it can be kind of interesting too because you're not sure, so it could be, something more, more interesting. And not always, not always frightening too. But.
Right. Yeah. So when you were a child, did you do any much drawing, or how did you as a child?
Yeah, I've been drawing, since a very young child. As a young child, I did a lot of drawing. I just started out, with the cartoons. That's very kind of basic cartoons, doing like Snoopy and things like that. But and then gradually went into like drawing figures and painting, painting figures, usually acrylic paint, of usually copying like record albums and things like that of faces, and just really just kind of had a knack for that, at an early age and pursued it. Took took all 4 years in high school of art classes,
Okay.
and just really loved that, whether it's painting or sculpture. And just wanted to continue on and keep doing that. There was something that I felt like I was good at, so I felt like it was something fun and kind of interesting, and I just kind of stuck with it.
Oh wow, that's really great. You know, it's interesting that you said what I've noticed, and I don't see a lot, but I know you do. You are very good with faces.
Mm-hmm.
And let's talk a little bit about how you were able to capture a person's face, because it's not just that you can just draw what you see, but you pull the person into the painting. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I try to, always look at the, at the face and pull out things that are characteristic of that person that's identifiable. I mean, and I think that gives a more true likeness to the person, to the painting of the person that I'm doing. So, and just I guess thinking more about, um, thinking how to structure the face, because it is usually kind of a basic structure that you follow. Um, with kind of a ratio of the face, and staying with that, just it's kind of a trick, in drawing or paintings, and kind of working through that. But then pulling out things that are specific to the person, and that and finding to capture a likeness, and I think that kind of brings out that person in the painting.
You do a very good job with faces, because I've seen people who you've done, and it looks just like them, and I can see them, but it's never like a photograph. And I think that's the beauty of what you are able to bring to your portrait. Ask you a little bit more about your use of color, the muted, the hushed tone. Uh, I am drawn to certain colors, and I see that your use of the muted, they're not ever washed out, but they're toned down. Could you talk a little bit how you were able to bring those muted tones to such a vibrancy? Because I know it might sound contradictory. That something muted could be vibrant at the same time, but that's what I see in your work.
I think it's because it is a night. There mostly are night scenes that I'm painting, so it's going to be darker. But I always look for like the violets and the blues to kind of bring out like either the sky or the street. And it's usually kind of a layering up of the colors. So it can get darker, in the darker areas, and then and then have the highlights as well. So it's I think does that kind of answer the question?
Do you have? I see, yeah, but I see like a predominance of certain colors. You use mauve a lot. Mauve, the violets, and the subtle shades. You don't ever do pastels. I don't remember seeing anything yours in pastels or any of the just like the overt brightness of colors. And so, what could you talk a bit about why you are drawn to, for instance, mauve? It has such a wide range because it goes from deep purple to pink, but you kind of stay right in the middle. Talk about that.
I guess because it is, there are night scenes that, it's going to be, darker, more muted. There, I don't know, there's something about, I mean, I've always liked the color mauve, or even that word mauve. It kind of, I remember from the 80s. It was like one of the it colors from the 80s, and I just have recently, well, more than recently, but become more interested in using that color, like using violets a lot, and blues a lot. But I think it gives something that's, I don't know, it's kind of a peaceful. And normally cities aren't peaceful, but it gives a kind of a soothing atmosphere to the cityscapes. And I like that. It's kind of a quietness in the paintings, but because it is a painting, things are still, and it's kind of a frozen moment in time, but it almost kind of gives that kind of cooling, soothing feeling as well.
Wow, that's good. I'm gonna just make it a little personal. One of my favorite paintings in the world is by Hieronymus Bosch. I like to say his name too. And so, do you have a favorite artist and a favorite piece of work that you like to, if you could tell me about, and why you like it?
There are so many that I love, but I recently have been more drawn to a lot of the like Edvard Munch.
Oh yeah, man.
The screen, and the use of in contrasting colors. I mean, these are I think in my paintings, I still use a lot of I use contrasting colors, but they are more muted because it's night scenes. But with a lot of the German expressionist painters, they would use these drawing colors to part of it was to create an emotional response to the subject matter to the painting, and that's what I try to do with a lot of the paintings as well. It's just kind of even the cities with a lot of the lurid colors that you see in a city, whether it's red and then there's some green. There's a lot of contrasting parts of like living in a city,
Yeah.
and it can be very jarring at the same time too. But then have the quiet moments as well too.
You said something that this really struck me. It struck me about your work. Emotional response. I know people say, "Oh, I don't know art, but I know what I like." Well, I think that's true for most people who've seen art. But for me, an emotional response, and I'm very tactile and emotional.
Mhm.
I emote widely almost on anything. But I'd like to talk just real briefly about this. This is one of my favorite pieces of yours. Could you tell me a little bit more about? I know what I see, but I want you to tell me what you saw when you saw that bridge.
A lot of my work is based on, I used photographs as reference, and this was a trip that my partner and I took to Berlin, and it's looking over the bridge over the River Spree. I think that that whole trip was kind of had a lot to do with the romance of the city. And although there may have been a lot of terrible things that probably did happen and did actually happen in Berlin, but just that image at night, it's on it's called Musée Teal. It's a museum island.
Oh.
I believe I'm pronouncing the German correctly, but it's a island with an art museum, a cathedral, the Berliner Dom. So it's looking out like as you're coming out of the cathedral, and then you can walk over that bridge, and I'm always fascinated by bridges
Me too.
that kind of connect other neighborhoods, connect other spaces, and it gives you like something to look beyond. Psychologically, it gives you something to kind of look to into the future. When you're looking, and that, I think that's what a lot of what cities do well is like they give you perspectives on other parts of the city. As long as like there's no walls blocking things off. Um, but for me, it was a lot about just kind of capturing that. It was a very cool night in the middle of winter, December. Um, the trees were barren, so it just had that very to me it was very romantic. It was very soothing as well, and uh, just that thought of the bridge and picking up a lot of I saw a lot of those violet tones and then the reflections of the gold. Just having that contrast was interesting to me as well. And the it is a more it's a more muted palette, but it is still that kind of German expressionist palette of using the opposite the complementary colors of gold and violet.
One of my favorite words, nostalgia. I feel that you talked about how the bridge connects to a future. I can see the bridge connecting to a past, past memories, past dreams, past love. And I see that as being something good for me. And I feel that when I look at your paintings. Do you ever see any sense of nostalgia as you paint?
I do. I think working with photographs, it's all to do with memory and then kind of distilling it down into like an image. So there is quite a bit of composition, but as long as it's saying something to me about something that I've experienced, that that's the way that I connect to the process of putting it onto a canvas and trying to convey that sense of being there and that what that feeling gave to me when I was there.
Well, so now I want to finish this up with one more, I guess, a thought. It might even be a question. But when I look at your work, I see story. I love story. And I can imagine being in your painting.
Mm-hmm.
Could you tell me how, is that something that you want to have people do? Or do you want to, how do you think people see what you do?
Yeah, I think with the painting, I want people to be able to, be able to walk through the painting. I think that's part of the painting process, kind of give an entrance or kind of a way to get into the painting, like almost physically get into the painting and then, and then kind of mentally move around and, and just looking through the painting as well, because always want to have it. So it's kind of open-ended, and I think a lot of my paintings they have an open-ended narrative somewhat. When I include figures, they're it can be interpreted as as somebody you're seeing another human, and that I think that creates a connection as well. But I try to keep it somewhat narrative, but kind of interpretive, so you can see yourself in that space.
Wow. Thank you, friend.
Oh, thank you.
So I loved it so much. This is the first time we really had a chance to just talk about your work. I loved it. Thank you again.
Thank you, Hwesi.